Welcome to the Creative Chats podcast with Mike Brennan. Well, welcome friends to another episode of Creative Chats. It's the podcast for artists, makers, and content creators where we talk about creativity, the creative process, and story. I'm your host, Mike Brennan. You can connect with me and check out some of my work over on my website, which is mikebrennan.me. And over there, I have resources created just for you, with you in mind, because you're creative. And even if you're listening today and you're thinking, I can't draw a stick figure, I can't dance, I can't make music, that's not what we're talking about at all, because creativity is so much bigger than that. It's the way that you see the world and what you do, what you make. And everybody makes something. And so it's not just being artistic, it's being creative. So I've created a whole host of resources waiting for you over on my website. There's resources like the free Daily Creative Habit Facebook group that you can join and be with some fellow like-minded creative people, post some work in progress, ask some questions, be a part of a community that is all rowing in the same direction. I also have the Daily Creative Habit Journal, which is a 90-day experience, self-guided, that helps you track and measure what it is that you're creating and to stay on course. Because so many times we think we have these creative projects and it's so ethereal and we don't really know if we're on target. We don't really know if we're making progress. And so this is a tool designed to help you track and measure and stay committed to a daily creative habit for 90 days. And I have other resources there as well that you can check out, some for free, some paid, but all designed again with you in mind. Now, for today's episode of Creative Chats, I sit down with Lily Clayton Hansen, and we have a conversation that I just love because she is somebody who has a wealth of creativity in terms of expressions. We talk about acting, we talk about writing, we talk about speaking, we talk about her desire to help others speak well, and the speaker coaching piece of things. And all of this comes out of her journey. All this comes out of her experience. She's a tremendous writer, interviewer. She shares a little bit about her experience there. She has a TED Talk that we talk about, and I highly encourage you to make sure you go check that out. At the end of our talk today, we list out some places where you can go follow her and her website. Those will be in the show notes as well, so you can just click and easily follow along and find out even more for yourself. And I know that you're going to be encouraged by this journey and by the wisdom that she shares. So without further ado, here is my creative chat with Lily Clayton Hansen. Well, welcome, Lily. I appreciate you being here today on the Creative Chats podcast.
Thank you, Mike. I'm a fan of your show. I just listened to an episode with my friend Beth English, which is how I found out about your podcast.
Yes.
And so I'm delighted to be here. And I apologize
That's awesome.
for my voice in advance. The pollen's been particularly awful in Nashville this season. So anyway, it's a little bit raspier than normal.
Yes. Well, it'll be sultry. That's what we'll say, right?
Like Scarlett Johansson.
Exactly. Awesome. Yes. And I love that we have the mutual connection of Beth. Yeah, she's wonderful. I really appreciate getting to know her here as I've been in Nashville. Not very long. I moved here in September. So she's been a person that's been connecting with me with other people and with the local scene here. So I appreciate this connection as well today. And I'm excited about our conversation.
Yes, very cool. And I didn't realize you had just moved here. So welcome. That's awesome. I just moved back. So we have that in common.
Okay, there we go. So you are a writer, you're an actor, you're a speaker, you're things in between that, I'm sure too, and there's overlap. We'll talk about some of that. But as you encounter people and people ask you like, so what do you do? What's your story? What is your like elevator pitch soundbite kind of thing that you go to? Or I know it may depend on who you're with, right? The audience, but typically what do you say when you're introducing yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. It does depend on who I'm speaking to. If I'm talking to someone in the acting world, we'll put somewhat of an emphasis on my writing, but more so on the fact that I've done screenwriting and I've written, 3 of my own short films, one of which won about 10 awards. But if I'm speaking with someone that is in, either the literary world or even more of like the corporate world, I'll put more of an onus on my writing background because that is really where, I got my start. But I would say my elevator pitch for myself is I'm a writer actor, host, and speaker. And most recently, I've gotten into doing speaking coaching, which I've always done, sort of informally. I have gotten paid for it for a long time, but I have recently more so formalized that business. But I really, I would say, in recent years, writing is always the backbone of everything that I do, even preparing for this interview. I was sitting there last night, this morning, journaling a little bit and getting clear on the answers that I wanted to provide you with, even though you said the conversation was going to be very conversational. I still am kind of a nervous wreck, even though I've done this a lot of times. But I always say that, writing will always be, my first love. It was the first thing I had a lot of success with as an arts and entertainment journalist. And then, a 3-time author with a regionally best-selling book, and then someone that went into doing large-scale corporate projects for companies like HCA, which is one of the biggest companies in the world. The performance piece is interesting because I grew up acting, and so I returned to it pretty seriously through public speaking. So that's a part of my journey, and it's just something I'm really, really passionate about. And I've just given myself permission to explore that side of my career more in recent years and take it more seriously.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And I love that you mentioned, something from the past kind of revisiting. I would love to know, what is your earliest creative memory? Like something that you were doing, an activity or something that was surrounding creativity that told you you are in fact a creative person. Like, do you have any of those things that stand out?
I grew up with two parents that are both professional artists. And I love this question, by the way. I think it's really lovely because, I would say my biggest goal in life, besides touching people with my work, is to stay connected to my childlike self. I actually have 3 pictures that I either carry with me often or I keep close to me in my apartment, and they're of me at different stages when I was a kid. So I believe one I'm 10. One I'm 8, and then the other one I'm like 4 years old. And I'm very lucky. My dad is a professional musician and cartoonist, and my mom was a professional makeup artist, which is a whole art form in and of itself. So I grew up drawing, singing, dancing. I was very serious about acting when I was a kid. I was even auditioning for like TV shows and films when I was a child. And I, just was that was what we did for fun. I mean, I even remember my dad and I would sit around and I would come up with a story for, a children's book. And some of them even won awards, which was really cool. And, he would illustrate it, or he would help me figure out how to illustrate it. And that was what we did for fun. And same thing with, singing and dancing and acting, creating my own work. I would perform, as a dancer and singer, singing Janet Jackson songs for my neighbors in my backyard. I just loved it. I just really loved expressing myself in all different facets. And even today, I mean, quite frankly, like what I still do for fun is like draw, or is, like write my own scenes for acting. And so I just think for me, it's when I feel my best. It's when I am probably, my best, most imaginative self. And it's also just really what comes most naturally to me. I have had periods of time where I wasn't creating a lot, and looking back on it, I think I had gone through a lot of really traumatic events, and, I was depressed even though I didn't realize it at the time. And I could just tell immediately, it was like it kind of sucked the life out of me to not be, living this life that was wholeheartedly artistic.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a tremendous gift to have, that kind of backdrop to come out of, grow up in this like creative patchwork thing where it's, the way you described it in being very organic, right? Like it's not like this is work and this is outside of work, but this is just life, and all of life is creative. And to have that modeled for you, I mean, that's tremendous. I'm assuming then that like your parents probably didn't have this strong opinion for you in terms of like if you were going to go into something that was creative or not for a living, right? Would that be fair to say?
I would say my family, I mean, they've always just encouraged whatever I had an interest in. So when I was a child, and, even though we didn't have a lot of money, the second that my mom saw that I was really, really passionate about acting, she did whatever she could to get me enrolled in acting classes, whether that was at the Chicago Park District, where they had very affordable classes, to this wonderful school I studied at every summer called Theater on the Lake. And I believe we got some sort of like a discount because of her income level. And so I was just always really encouraged, whatever I was interested in at that time, to study and to do it to the best of my ability and to take it seriously as well. And so when writing crossed my plate, that was through a college professor. I didn't really know what I wanted to do in college. I was an art major in high school. And, when I got to college, and I quite honestly just sort of had a reality check with myself about my abilities. I do think I'm a good drawer, but I don't think that I was like someone that was going to, become a fine artist or like, work for an advertising agency or something. I remember I was talking to the teacher one day and I said, I don't really know what to do because, I just spent the last 4 years just studying visual art. And, I grew up acting when I was a kid and I haven't done that in a while. And she said, well, you're a really great writer. I have been really impressed by your essays and, pieces in our classes. Why don't you pursue that through an internship? And so that was when she set me up with Time Out Chicago, who I will forever be thankful for. I ended up interning there actually more than twice as long as it was supposed to be because I just had such a wonderful time and they kept passing me around between different departments where I, was interested in or I had maybe certain strengths and abilities. And that really kickstarted my freelance writing career as an arts and entertainment journalist.
Hmm. Yeah. I love that this organic path kind of emerges as you're there and you take next steps, right? It's so funny because so often we can plan and we can try and do the best that we can to think like, this is what I'm going to do. This is what it's going to look like. And yet I'd say most of the time, that's not what really happens in real life. And we need to learn to kind of adapt and to take advantage of the things that are before us, follow the breadcrumbs and then build on that, right? So as you're kind of emerging into this writing and this world of probably bringing together those elements from the past, feeding into your creativity, what was the thing that was driving you to really want to do this? Like, what was your motivation, and what maybe still is your motivation of the things that you do? Like, is it more of a quest for, connecting with people? Is it a quest for understanding yourself in the midst of your work, or, those kind of things?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, because I am a very honest person, I think at first it was just ego, and I'm not ashamed to say that at all. It's like a lot of musicians get started playing guitar because they want to talk to pretty girls, and so I think it felt really good to be good at something, to be recognized at that at a young age because I was really young. I think I got started with my internship at Town Chicago when I was a junior. And so I was 21. And, I'm working with people that are like literally twice my age. And, they're applauding me for, the fact that I can interview a famous musician or a well-known author and get it somewhat right. I mean, I definitely had articles that I wrote that came back with a million red marks, and every writer knows that's like your dreaded like moment. God, I just got my piece that I worked so hard on scrutinized. But I would say it was so cool to see my name in print in a byline. I mean, wow, someone like me where like I grew up reading. I was such a voracious reader as a child. I mean, I just loved to read, and I read a lot of magazines too, especially as a teenager. I mean, I subscribed to like, several magazines, and if I couldn't afford to subscribe to them, I would go to the library and take them out because I just loved fashion and I loved celebrities and arts and entertainment, and I was always going to rock concerts, when I was in high school and, getting all dolled up. And that's what my girlfriends and I would do. We're going to see the Distillers. We're going to go see the Strokes. We're so cool and grown up, So then when I got to Time Out Chicago and they're like, hey, do you want to intern in the music department and take over our music blog? I'm like, heck yeah. I mean, that's awesome. I get to tell them, hey, I want to go to this show and then contact this booking agent. They're like, yeah, we'll put you on the guest list. You don't even have to pay for it. And I get to interview an artist that I really like. And I mean, it was just so incredibly cool. And looking back on it, I was so grateful. I remember I had a boyfriend once who was like, you never pay for anything. I'm like, I know. I was like, it's awesome. So I think it was just it was so fitting for my personality too because I was like Miss Social and I just loved people. I was a party girl and I was always like I had my fake ID since I was like 17 and going out to bars and stuff, and so it was just like I was like a socialite, so to get to paid to hang out with cool people and write about them, I was like, this is a dream job. Now what I realized quickly is music journalists don't make a lot of money. So I had to figure out other ways to monetize my gifts. But I would say I had a pretty charmed like entree into the industry.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. And, when you start with something that you love and you have experiences that continue to just solidify that, I think that helps set you up for whatever does come next, right? And the things that like, okay, I'm not selling out here. I'm not just doing this to chase money. I'm not just doing this because somebody told me to, but like you really start to understand yourself in the midst of that, understand what you like, what you don't like, and the way you do that is by just doing things, right? Taking action and creating and taking advantage of opportunities. So as you're continuing in this and is acting still a part of your life at this point? Or is it like you've kind of left that a little bit off to the side, in the timeline of things? Like, how does that unfold?
Yeah, no, I was very serious about acting as a kid. I mean, a lot of my very vivid memories, if they're not of me like drawing or like singing with my dad or, playing games with my mom, are of me in my room by myself. Like, I don't know what I was doing, like dressing up as different characters and performing monologues and scenes. I mean, I was just like into it, and I just looking back, I'm like, it's like adorable, but I think I was just like constantly like creating different like plays in my room by myself. And so one that made me like, it pretty easy when I got back into acting where, it's a lot of actors talk about, oh, it's really hard for me to learn my lines. I'm like, no, I just think as I grew up doing it, it's like you get the script, you stand there for an hour by yourself, just repeating it over and over and you go. But I got out of it when I was about 12. Just don't think I could handle rejection at that point. And and it's really interesting because I'm really glad that I did get out of it in retrospect because I think as I sang and danced and I had the charisma in spades as a kid and I was really good looking. I was like modeling when I was a child. I do think I could have made it on a big level, but I think I was so incredibly sensitive and, just had a very thin skin. I would describe myself as like a highly sensitive person. I think it would have just not really been conducive to me being in a good mental state, or I would have ended up like a Lindsay Lohan type. And so I just kind of knew it wasn't right for me at that point. I even found something I wrote recently. It was really interesting. It was very wise. I was like 12 years old at the time, and I was writing about how even though I loved acting, I thought I was going to step behind the scenes for a while because I just didn't know if I could take the pressure. And so I decided just to kind of stop and and then I didn't really get back into it till I was like in my early 30s and I just really couldn't stop thinking about it. All of a sudden it just became kind of like an obsession. And I had a friend in my building. I live at the Ryman Artist Lofts in Nashville, which is a building dedicated solely to artists. I lived here for 9 years prior and I just moved back in recently. Anyway, my friend who I still am in contact with, who's a renowned theater actress, she said, I'll give you an acting lesson. How about like $30? I'm like, geez, $30. What can you get for $30 these days? And so we started working together. And I think, through her instilling confidence in me, seeing right away that I had a natural gift and, knack for it. And then also giving me like some sort of structure, like through, revisiting plays because I grew up doing theater. So, but now we're working on it for like film because that's my focus. That's what really gave me the confidence to pick it back up again as an adult after, it really being kind of dormant for about like almost 20 years.
Yeah. I love that those pieces of us don't really ever die. They're always there for us. And all we need to do is lean back into them. And so often, like the things that informed us earlier in childhood come back around. I mean, I know that was my story too, of kind of rediscovering. And yet, when you rediscover something in a different place in life, it all of a sudden becomes something new and fresh. And it can be a real gift for you. And then as you engage with it, the people around you receive that gift too. So I love that this is part of your story and that you've kind of taken these parts and you've kind of weaved it together. I almost see in my mind almost like a patchwork kind of, taking from this and taking from that and letting things inform. And as now talking about speaking, right? You've got writing, you've got acting, and now speaking we'll talk about. Was that a direct kind of stepping point from the acting that you were like, okay, well, obviously your natural abilities to be able to be a performer, to be on stage, to be in front of people, to be okay with, public speaking, which is a fear of a lot of people.
Mhm.
That's not the case for you. Was it then taking like more of the thoughts that you have in writing that kind of have time to marinate and then saying, I think there's more to this that I can actually present in a different format? Or like, what was the way that you kind of found your way into that and then made it interesting enough for you to go, this is something I want to pursue?
Yeah, I mean, the public speaking thing that came about through the success of my first book. I was interviewed on camera quite a bit, on all the local news stations when that book, which is called Word of Mouth Nashville Conversations, and it was a regionally best-selling book. So that means it did very well in this part of the country. And I never pretend like I was on the New York Times bestseller list, but I mean, for me, having a book that was even selling in other states in the South was just so exciting at the time. And so, I had people start reaching out to me who said, hey, I saw you on a Talk of the Town, or the other show right now is escaping me, Today in Nashville. I was on all of those shows speaking about my book, and on, different, this was, one podcast for brand new, but different podcasts. And then I was interviewed on a couple of people's YouTube shows. And I apparently had, again, the gift for conveying my message, I think, in a charismatic, kind of comical way where I don't take myself too seriously. And so my first big speaking engagement was I was contacted by a wonderful organization in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I don't even remember how they found out about my book. And I was contacted by them. They said, hey, we would love to pay you to fly down here to speak at an event. And it would be, a Thursday night. We would pay for your hotel, give you a stipend for food, and just talk about your career. And we will market it heavily to the creative community. And so that was, really the thing that galvanized my interest in it. Because, my experience, prior to that, was very limited. To just mostly interviews. I don't even think I had spoken at a university at that point. But I remember I really fell in love with speaking at that event because I had worked very hard on this speech that I had written. And I realized when I started delivering it in front of this audience, it wasn't that it didn't work. It was very well written and thought out. And, I think it was just more written in the style of a book, which made sense because I came from, an authorship now at this background, at this point in time, writing these long form magazine articles for years. And so I just remember I stuck to the speech, but I sort of started switching it up when I was talking and getting a little more conversational and, going off script. And I flipped through a couple slides that I didn't really feel like were relevant. And anyway, I just sort of, improvised, which is a big thing in acting that I love, and I've been told by directors that I'm very good at improvising because I let myself be free in that way. And so I remember after the talk was over, I was standing at my table, I was signing books for people. They're, taking photos with me. They're very excited to meet me. And I was thinking, wow, I connected with people just through talking about my story. I didn't, really even, in my opinion, say anything that was truly earth shattering. I just, spoke about what I had done. I was honest about it. I tried to pull out the lessons and give some, pointers about things that I had learned or wish I knew at the beginning. But it was pretty simple and just, again, based on the path of me. And so it was just very exciting. And so I just organically started saying, okay, well, it was really nice to get paid a lot of money to do this. That was exciting. But what if I just put myself out there as even willing to do this for free? So I started speaking at universities, both in Nashville and Chicago, where I'm from. I spoke at Vanderbilt here, Belmont, Columbia College in Chicago, which is very renowned. And then I started getting asked to speak at different events at co-working spaces. That became a big thing. I hosted Creative Mornings, which is a huge event here. Once I did, a live interview with people that to show my interviewing skills, obviously, which has always been the background of my writing. So I really just took advantage of any opportunity I could to do it, and also events where I could usually get filmed and watch myself afterwards so I could see how I could get better. And that's, we'll go into this later in our conversation, but that was really when I started realizing, oh, maybe one day you could teach this, because I had to teach myself how to become a better public speaker because I don't really think I was that good at it at first. I think that I became better by being very self aware and working on really bad habits I developed.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, and the more you do something, the better you get at it. And the more, I like that you said, you had opportunity to watch yourself and kind of step outside the moment that you're in, because you can never assess yourself while you're doing something. It's impossible because you're too invested in what's happening in the moment. But to be able to look at something afterwards and say, okay, here's where I can improve. Here's where I thought I came across a certain way, but obviously I didn't, right? And to take notes on yourself, really be a critic for yourself, to continue to improve. I love that. So as you're doing this, and as you're writing all these creative activities, did you ever feel like a point where one was competing with another, or that there was like um, you kind of focus on your attention over here, and then this one is starving for attention, and then you're like, oh, now I got to turn to this one, and then do this, and then that is starving, like the spinning plate kind of thing. Did you, or is it really more for you kind of organic and saying whatever the season is, it's okay for something to come to the foreground, something else to go background?
No, I was really lucky. I had about a 10-year period that was pretty charmed, I would say, where I felt like I couldn't make a wrong move. It was like the next right thing just presented itself to me. And I stayed very focused. I was very focused on my writing and my interviews. And, if I got an opportunity to do a speaking engagement, I did something that was related to one of those things. And, that also felt natural because I still was writing that speech, for what I was doing. And I also was getting to some, degree practice public speaking when I was interviewing people all the time. Because sometimes there'd be like a publicist in the room watching us, or I started getting into doing interviews on camera or for live events. So everything just felt very natural and focused. And I think I had as much success as I did, which my crown, I would say achievement was getting a TED Talk, when I was in my early 30s. So we'll talk about that. But no, I stayed very focused and I sort of pursued other stuff that I was interested in the margins. It's why recently I've, had to say to myself, I don't really do very well when I'm scattered. I've had periods where I was scattered and I find that nothing really takes off. When things for me really start to rock and roll and I've had major success in the past is when I one take myself seriously in a healthy way where I say, okay, I'm really going to pursue this. I'm really going to study this. I'm going to ask for good money for it and market the hell out of myself, but also kind of brand myself like that. So even more recently where I said to myself, I want to be acting, hosting, and speaking. And this is how I'm going to position it, whether it's on the internet or if I'm in a conversation with someone, because no one else is going to really do that except you. And so I would say for myself, the most success I've had has come when I took myself seriously, but still had fun with it, not too seriously where you suck the joy out of something that you're doing, and also just was laser focused. So even my mom and I were very close, where I would say she's my best pal in the whole world. We always come up with words at the beginning of every year, and my words this year, I forget what hers were. I think one of hers was flow. Mine was faith and focus. So anytime I start to, get distracted, or I don't even get that shiny object syndrome. I get like nervous or scared that something's, not taking off immediately or as fast as I wanted to. I will say, okay, if I really had faith in this, I would be able to focus. And so that's what I am. That's my mantra right now.
Nice. Yeah. And you mentioned the TED Talk, so let's pivot into that for a minute. First off, was this something that you sought out, or this is something that was just kind of the opportunity you were like, "Ooh, this is here. Let me seize this."
I did seek it out. It didn't happen when I sought it out, though. It happened organically. So I attended my first TEDx event 2 years before actually getting selected to do one myself. I remember I had actually I don't think I had like really heard of TED Talks. I mean, I maybe had, but I wasn't, a devotee or super familiar with the platform or someone that listened to them regularly. Now I am. I think they're great, but it just really hadn't crossed my plate. And so I was taken to the event by a good friend of mine. And I remember her taking me around afterwards and introducing me to the committee, members and saying, hey, she would be a great person to speak at this event. You should really consider it. She's an excellent public speaker and a very well known writer in town. And I think she'd have a lot to say about the art of interviewing. And so I followed up as I always do. I think I followed up even multiple times, the following year and just never heard back. And so, I always think divine timing, right? It's like I was the following year, didn't even think about the, event. I think I was in conversation with someone and they happened to mention that they were on the committee that year. And I said, oh, that's really funny because, I had emailed them a few times and they never got back to me. I just figured whatever, their loss and moving on to other greater things. And he said, well, actually, I would love to pitch you as a speaker because I think you'd be dynamite. And so we get to bring people's names to the table that we think would be, an excellent fit. So he did, and I got it. And mine was an unusual circumstance where I didn't really have like a fully formed idea when I went in. I just knew I had this really unique, interesting career as a writer and interviewer. I had learned a lot about not just humanity, but myself through talking to people all around the world, strangers, as I call them, that I turn into friends, and really opening myself up to them and them up to me. And so that was kind of all I went in, really with this concept. They ended up setting me up with a really great speaking coach, and he was instrumental in really getting my idea into a crystallized format that fit into a 19-minute talk. And so it was a very, very challenging process. I would advise people that are interested in doing a TED Talk to really do it at a time where you can commit a lot to it. I have no idea how someone that worked like a full-time job would have done it, honestly, because, I was working in the evenings at a really great magic venue at the time where I also was performing every night because we gave tours. And anyway, I was working on it all day, every day. And I think that's why mine was so successful. If I had to sort of fit it into the margins of my daily life, I don't think it would have, one, been as enjoyable, and two, really worked. But it ended up being an amazing calling card. And I still can't even tell you how many people will email me, a week usually, and say, wow, I watched your TED Talk. I absolutely loved it. This is what it did for me. It reminded me of how much I enjoy making new friends and, opening myself up in a vulnerable way in order to connect with people that come from very different walks of life.
Yeah. Yeah. I've known a couple of people who have done TED Talks, and certainly it's a very intense process, like you said, and also is a great thing that once it's done and it's out there, it's on the internet, it lives on, right? And you never know where something may end up. And the fact of having to go through a process where you're distilling down what you want to say into that, I think it's like 20 minutes that they give you tops, right? Like it has to be under 20 minutes. Is that correct?
Under 20, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So that process of like stripping away the things that aren't really the main things, and really coming to a point to say, here it is. Here's the there's no fluff in here. There's no time for fluff, right? So that process is tremendously difficult. I know, even for other people that I've spoken to who have not necessarily been in a TED environment, but gone through that process of refinement and going, you have to actually do more work to do a shorter message and to say less, because you have to whittle away and get to the bare bones of the thing to make sure that you're really saying succinctly what it is that you want to say. So, that's tremendous that you had that opportunity to do that, and that continues to live out there. And when you talk about conversations with people and interviews, one of the things that came to mind was, I don't know if you're familiar with the book, Brian Grazer, who is the producer in Hollywood who works with Ron Howard. He wrote a book, I believe it's called A Curious Mind. And he talks a lot about how that's his philosophy in life, of just having these conversations with people, like taking the time, even if it was like he gets in an Uber or a cab or something, he wants to spend a certain amount of time talking with that person and kind of like forgetting about like status and like anything else, and just have an honest conversation and see what develops of that. And I always thought that was such a beautiful thing to be able to do that. And he described it as a way of living a bigger life because you have better experiences, because everything is not so scripted and not so planned, and you're open to possibility, you're open to that curiosity. So I'm wondering, like, in your work with interviews and in conversations, what is it that helped shape that for you? Is it a desire to connect with a person on a certain level, or have a certain experience? Like, what informs you when you go into that?
I think I just really love learning from people's stories. Even growing up, I mean, as I mentioned before, I was a voracious reader. And, when I got into high school in particular, I read a lot of biographies and mostly about artists and musicians. But, I read a couple that were about historical or political figures. Just found it really fascinating to learn from people's lives. Maybe it felt as though I was less alone in my own trials and tribulations. And I also felt like I was getting some sort of insider secret to life. I mean, by reading about people who had been successful, but also overcome very challenging things as well too. And so I would say it's that I really, I've never met the same person twice. I always say that. I find every person I meet, there's something unique about them. You don't connect with everyone, of course, that's not realistic. But there is something that I find, that I can grasp onto that shows me their innate humanity, or like something that makes me see their essence. And I just think it reminds me to do that with myself as well. And that really the most important thing for me in this world isn't staying abreast of every news cycle that was released or winning awards. It's really making the most out of my life and learning my life lessons and having a very enriched experience through gaining wisdom. And so I
Yeah.
think that's why I've incorporated that into everything that I do. And I like sharing that wisdom with others. I mean, that was like one of the
Mm-hmm.
best feelings when I released my first book. And that was really my driving force with it because, I mean, it wasn't an easy process. And I mean, at a certain point, I didn't even know if I was going to be able to find a publisher or have the money to self publish it. But I remember I just kept thinking, I just feel like I have such great wisdom to share. I've just done these amazing interviews with all these really smart people that spent time being very thoughtful about what they had learned from, trying to make a living doing what they love. It's like, if this could help people, please, like, universe, like, set me up with the right path in order to get this out into the world. And so I think I really enjoy, at the end of the day, being able to put positive information out there that's going to help people live more fulfilling, enriched, and also easier lives. Life can be very challenging. And it's like, so, I don't think there's any shortcuts, but I think if what you take in really matters. And I think, if you're taking in really positive, inspirational stuff, it certainly can't hurt.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, honestly, that's the reason why I started this podcast. Was I wanted to have conversations with people, and it was a lot easier to say, "Hey, can you be on my podcast?" Especially with some people who may be a little more protective of their time. They're a little harder to reach, right? To say, "Can you be on my podcast?" as opposed to, "Hey, can I just have like a 20-minute conversation with you or whatever, half hour?" And I also thought to myself, well, why let what they have to share stop with me? Like, it's great that I have this conversation, but if I'm curious about these things, if I have these questions, then certainly there are other people who have these questions too. And that sentiment of, I need to know that my context isn't just mine. I need to know that somebody else has been through this, or somebody else is going through this, and here's how they dealt with it, or here's their advice from their own life experience, and let that transfer a little bit. And so I love having these conversations and getting into people's stories and finding out the information and the application, all of that, because I do believe that when we allow ourselves access to other people's stories and experiences, there is that wisdom that comes and can land on us and help us. Sometimes it's like the right time, the right place. You're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I heard that conversation or was a part of that, because I'm at this crossroads right now, and I'm needing that. And I feel like it was just set up just for me. And I've had those moments. I'm sure it sounds like you've had those moments too. That's the beauty of this stuff, is when we're willing to share, when we're willing to connect, it goes beyond us and can be a tremendous help to other people. And along those lines, as I'm talking about other people, is your motivation in now saying helping other people? I know you said you've done this for a little while, but you're maybe concentrating a little bit more on this in terms of speaker coaching. Is it to take all that you've experienced and learned and say, I want to have this be the ripple effect? Let this affect other people so that their messages, so that what they have to say can get refined and get out there. Like, is that what drives you in that work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we live in a world where, everyone, regardless of whether or not you are a public speaker, we all have to build personal brands. I mean, even, people that are company founders who at one point in time could just, hide behind their employees or their product and now have to put out their own story and their own, match the face to the product or to the service or whatever it is. It's just sort of expected. And so, I think there's a real niche and market for it. And I like giving people confidence when it comes to speaking and really helping them feel empowered to convey their message. I know for me, it really gave me a lot of confidence when I started public speaking because I used to be afraid of it. And I remember when I was in high school, I had an experience where I was in science class, my least favorite class, and where I felt like I didn't understand a single thing. And I remember it was the first time I ever had a full blown panic attack. I mean, the room started spinning. Things got really dark and disoriented. I mean, I almost fainted in front of the class when I was giving a presentation. And so it was such an awful feeling. It didn't speak again for many years. And then when I got back into it, it was like I think gained a lot of confidence doing something that I was deathly afraid of. It's the same thing when I got back into acting, where I think really what gave me the confidence was just doing it, because I had so many fears around it. So I like to empower other people to also have that same experience, whether it's speaking in public settings or on camera. And then also selfishly, I like listening to people that are well spoken. I think we are in an era, and I think about this a lot, where I'll listen to podcasts, even ones that are very popular, and the host is not well spoken. And I just think it really puts out a terrible message to the world that we can pepper our discussions with likes and ums and meander and, not be articulate or eloquent or, try to expand our vocabulary. And it's just okay because we live in the world of, we can talk in acronyms and speak like we're in a TikTok video all the time. And I just don't think it's good. I mean, one of my favorite things to do is to study great public speakers. And, a lot of them are people from the past. I mean, John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr. I mean, there's certain female authors that I really enjoy listening to. I mean, a modern person I think is great is Terry Gross on NPR. I mean, there's so many Oprah. I mean, there's so many great speakers out there that people could just listen to and study and realize that it is such a empowering thing to be able to convey your message in a way where people can actually hear you. And, that might be something as simple as slowing down when you talk, which I feel ridiculous saying because I feel like I've been talking really quickly the last couple of minutes because I get really excited about these topics. But if we were in a public speaking setting or I was speaking on camera, just one-to-one, I would be speaking in a much different way. I think for me, it's just something that I'm passionate about, and it's sort of similar to wanting to talk about reading a lot and how I think it's important for people to read every day because I don't want to live in the world of stupid.
Yeah.
I just don't. And I don't think that you can learn everything from AI or TikTok videos. So I would hope that we can continue to raise the bar intellectually where we can think critically and we get enjoyment and pleasure out of reading. And there's a little bit higher of an expectation that when you're in a conversation, you should have something to contribute to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And certainly that is only going to happen if you have input, if you have inspiration and you do that intentionally, because most of the time that stuff is not going to find you. You have to go find it.
Yes, exactly. So yes, if anyone's listening, have been offering public speaking and media coaching services for years on a more informal level. I'm just simply formalizing something that I've been doing for a long time. But I love to work with people. I think as a coach, I'm very, attentive and, compassionate and, create a real safe space for people to work on their skills. And my goal is to help you with whatever you're working on in that moment. So, I kind of take the approach that my acting coaches took to me for years, which is, we don't have to go through like some sort of regimen or, very formalized approach to this. It's like whatever you're struggling with, whether it's like you don't know how to make a TikTok video or you've got a presentation coming up that you're scared about, let's tackle that first.
Perfect. Yeah. So along those lines, where can people find you if they're like, yes, help me, please help me? Lay some links on us. Where can people go to find you and to follow you and to hire you potentially?
Yeah, well, I'm excited. I actually did launch a TikTok account recently. It's the same handle as my Instagram account, and I'm going to be posting on there regularly. I was going to actually film a couple of videos, hopefully later today, but I've been enjoying that. So my handle for both is at Miss MISS Lily Hansen, and I would be delighted if you would follow me on there. I also have a website that I'm going to start adding new interviews to ASAP. It's been, sort of a slow burn the last couple of years because I had pivoted my focus to other things, but I am very passionate about my website, which is Word of Mouth Conversations. That's the title of my publishing company and my book series, and I'm going to start filming on-camera interviews with some really amazing movers and shakers in Nashville and then hopefully beyond. So please follow along. If you see I haven't posted in a while, I promise you I'm going to start again on a regular schedule very soon, and I would love for you to, again, watch this on-camera interview series that I'm developing.
Awesome. Amazing. I love all of that. And I'm encouraging the listeners right now to be sure to go follow you, to connect with you, to consume your content and to learn more about you, because this is just, I'm sure, the tip of the iceberg here. And this is to whet everybody's appetite to go, yes, there's more, and let's dive in. So thank you so much for this time today. Thank you for sharing your story, your experiences, your wisdom, your talents, your gifts, all of that. When you show up, everybody wins. So thank you.
My pleasure. And I'll say one last thing. Please check out and share my TED Talk, Talking to Strangers is my self-care. It increasingly gets more views every week. My dream has always been for it to go viral, quite simply because I think in a world where we make it very difficult for people to connect face to face and everything's done virtually, my talk will galvanize you and light a fire in you to go out there and have conversations with people in your own community, which will in turn, I believe, make you happy. So that's the last plug I'll give, but please check it out. Everyone that's listening to the talk really enjoys it, and I hope it increasingly gets shared. And thank you, Mike. It was a delight. You're a wonderful interviewer, and that's coming from someone that's interviewed over 1,500 people in my career. So I give you the utmost compliments, and I'm just really happy that this worked out. So thanks.
Me too. Me too. Thank you. And you can actually say, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. So that's that.
Exactly.
Thanks for listening today. I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe, leave a rating and a review. It really helps this podcast be seen and heard by others.